Texas hiking trail horror, DNA breakthrough in the Stacey Dramiga case. The afternoon sun dipped low over the leafy path of the Solaro Creek Greenway Trail on the east side of San Antonio. It was a quiet moment, perfect for a long walk, and for Stacey Dramiga, 63, someone who loved those walks. But that day, something snapped. In a wooded stretch near a curve of the trail, Stacey's stroll turned into a nightmare. Within yards of the trail's pavement, her body was discovered, hidden from the crowd. She had been beaten so severely, her skull was fractured, sexually assaulted, and her body partially set on fire. People.com plus San Antonio Express News plus WOAI. The horror of it hit the investigators instantly. A rock lying nearby bore DNA, mixing with samples on her body, evidence they believed tied directly to the attack. MySA +1. For months, they had the DNA profile of the male attacker. They just didn't know who it was. Then, nearly a year after Stacey vanished during that walk she took so often, a routine arrest of a 23-year-old man, Samuel Acom-Chirone, for unrelated criminal mischief triggered a DNA match. His cheek swab linked him to Stacey's murder, and suddenly, the mystery cracked wide open. People.com +1. Imagine the moment. Investigators staring at the lab results, the number blinking match after match, the odds so slim that they called it nearly 1 in 126 quadrillion against the suspect's DNA not matching. WOAI +1. The track walker, the rock, the woods, the shimmering afternoon that turned into human horror. Now, a suspect stood accused. But as detectives closed in, drama piled on. Samuel denied involvement, telling police that's not possible, even when shown the images and the evidence. San Antonio Express News +1. And that's where Chapter 1 ends, with the breakthrough, the arrest, the denial, and a detective's line, "That man you just met out there is a monster." San Antonio Express News. What really happened that morning? Why was Stacey targeted when she was just doing what she always did, walking a trail she loved? And how did investigators link that one rock, one DNA sample, to a person who months later was picked up for something seemingly unrelated? Stay tuned for how it began, the backstory, the trail, the steps leading up to this moment of reckoning. The news of Stacey Dramiga's death spread through San Antonio like wildfire. Friends couldn't believe it. Neighbors stood outside their homes whispering and shaking their heads. Stacey wasn't someone who lived a dangerous life. She was a kind woman, 63 years old, warm, friendly, and loved her routines. She worked part-time, volunteered at her church, and spent most mornings walking the Solaro Creek Greenway Trail. It was her peaceful escape, a place where she said she could breathe and clear her mind. That trail was supposed to be safe. Families jogged there, cyclists passed through, even park rangers patrolled the path regularly. But all it took was one dark moment, one violent person, to change that sense of peace forever. The morning of April 4th, 2024 began like any other for Stacey. She got up early, made coffee, and called her sister to chat about weekend plans. "I'm heading out to the trail. It's too nice to stay in today." She grabbed her sneakers, tied them tight, and left her house around 9:30 a.m. Security cameras near the park caught her car arriving at the trailhead just before 10. She parked in her usual spot. You could even see her in the footage, a small woman in a pink shirt, adjusting her earbuds, walking toward the path. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When she didn't come home later that day, her sister grew worried. Stacey never stayed out late. She wasn't the type to disappear without calling. By 8 p.m., her family contacted police and filed a missing persons report. Officers began searching immediately, starting at the trail where her car was still parked, untouched. At first, they hoped she had gotten lost or injured, but when searchers found her phone off, the hope began to fade. A few hours later, a police dog picked up her scent, leading officers off the paved path and into a wooded area about 50 yards away. That's where they found her body. The scene was brutal.
so shocking that seasoned detectives stood in silence. Stacey had been attacked with the rock, her injury severe. Her clothing was torn, and there were signs of a struggle. Someone had tried to cover what they did by setting her body on fire. But even through the horror, the detectives noticed one critical detail: a rock nearby, smeared with blood. Crime scene investigators sealed off the area. They collected every possible piece of evidence: the rock, broken branches, shoe prints, fibers, and ashes. They hoped something there would tell them who had done this. When the DNA results came back from the lab, they had a complete male profile. It was strong evidence, but it didn't match anyone in their system. The suspect had no criminal record, no fingerprints on file, nothing to compare against. It was like chasing a ghost. Detective Marcus Alvarez, one of the lead investigators, refused to give up. "We knew this wasn't random," he told reporters later. "Someone had been out there that day. Someone who saw her and decided to act." Over the next few weeks, police canvassed the area. They interviewed every hiker, cyclist, and park worker who had been near the trail that day. A few witnesses remembered seeing Stacey walking, alone but cheerful. One witness, a jogger, told officers he noticed a man sitting on a bench near the wooded turnoff, a younger man with dreadlocks wearing dark clothes. He said the man looked out of place, just staring at people as they walked by. Officers searched for him, but there were no clear photos or security footage of that specific area. Without a name or solid evidence, the case grew cold. Months passed. Stacey's family struggled with grief and frustration. Her sister often stood near the trail's entrance, leaving flowers by the sign. "I just want justice. I want to know who did this and why." Detectives continued running the DNA through national databases, but every search came back the same: no match found. Then, nearly a year later, everything changed. In May 2025, a young man named Samuel Aquim Charon was arrested by San Antonio police for a minor offense: breaking into a convenience store and damaging property. During booking, officers followed standard procedure and collected his DNA. They didn't expect anything unusual. But when that sample hit the national system, a red flag appeared on the screen. Match found. The DNA matched the male profile from the Stacey Dramiga case with almost impossible precision. Analysts later said the odds of it being anyone else were less than 1 in a trillion. Detective Alvarez got the call at 2 a.m. "We've got him," the lab tech said. "The Dramiga case. We've got your guy."
By sunrise, police had surrounded Sharon's small apartment. He didn't resist when officers entered. He seemed calm, even confused. When they told him why he was under arrest, he looked up blankly and said, "That's not possible." But inside his apartment, investigators found several troubling things: clothing that matched witness descriptions, and a small bag containing burned debris similar to what had been found at the crime scene. As they questioned him, Sharon maintained his innocence. "I didn't touch that woman," he said repeatedly. "I don't even know her." Detectives pressed him harder. They showed him photos from the trail, images of Stacey and the rock that had his DNA. Still, he denied everything. His background began to emerge. He was only 23, with a history of minor arrests, trespassing, vandalism, and petty theft, but nothing violent. He lived alone and often wandered the city's trails at night. Some neighbors described him as quiet but strange, while others said he talked to himself. Police began reconstructing that April day using his cell phone data. His phone pinged near the Salado Creek Trail around 9:50 a.m., the same time Stacey was seen entering the park. 30 minutes later, the phone disconnected, then reappeared on the network 2 miles away around 11:30 a.m. Investigators believed that window of time was when the attack occurred. The evidence was mounting, but there were still questions. Why Stacey? Why that day? Was this planned or a random act? Detective Alvarez later said that what disturbed him most was how ordinary it all looked before the violence began. He said, "You have two paths crossing, a kind, everyday woman and a man whose choices destroyed everything. It's haunting because it could have been anyone." When Sharon's case reached the media, it shocked the entire community. Local stations replayed Stacey's final footage over and over, her walking calmly into the sunlight, completely unaware of the danger waiting ahead. Vigils were held near the trail. Hundreds came with candles, holding photos of Stacey. Her family thanked the police for never giving up. "It won't bring her back," her sister said softly, "but at least we know the truth." Still, behind the relief, there was unease. The DNA match was strong, but Sharon's denial left lingering doubt. The district attorney's office began preparing for a tough fight in court. The defense was already hinting that the DNA might have been transferred or contaminated, claiming Sharon had visited the trail before, but never harmed anyone. Detective Alvarez knew this wouldn't end quickly. He said, "We solved who. Now we have to prove how and why." As the trial date approached, the case gained national attention. News outlets across America began calling it the Texas Hiking Trail Horror. People compared it to other high-profile DNA breakthroughs, cases once cold for months or years, cracked open by a single sample. But one part of the story remained missing. What exactly happened in those final minutes on the trail? Did Stacey see her attacker before it was too late? Did she try to run? Police believe she fought back, hard. Evidence from her fingernails contained traces of the attacker's skin cells, confirming she resisted. That was likely the final piece of evidence that sealed Sharon's fate. Yet even with DNA, phone records, and witness accounts, something about his calm denial unsettled investigators. Some wondered if there was more to the story, if another person might have been nearby, or if Sharon's mental state played a darker role. Late one evening, Detective Alvarez sat in his office looking at photos from the case file. The trail, the rock, Stacey's smiling face. He whispered to himself, "We got him, but I still don't understand why."
As the trial date approached, the case gained national attention. News outlets across America began calling it the Texas Hiking Trail Horror. People compared it to other high-profile DNA breakthroughs, cases once cold for months or years, cracked open by a single sample. But one part of the story remained missing. What exactly happened in those final minutes on the trail? Did Stacey see her attacker before it was too late? Did she try to run? Police believe she fought back, hard. Evidence from her fingernails contained traces of the attacker's skin cells, confirming she resisted. That was likely the final piece of evidence that sealed Sharon's fate. Yet, even with DNA, phone records, and witness accounts, something about his calm denial unsettled investigators. Some wondered if there was more to the story, if another person might have been nearby, or if Sharon's mental state played a darker role. Late one evening, Detective Alvarez sat in his office looking at photos from the case file. The trail, the rock, Stacey's smiling face. He whispered to himself, "We got him, but I still don't understand why." That unanswered why would follow him and the Dramiga family into the courtroom. The courtroom was cold, almost too cold, like a place where the truth had to fight its way through the air. Reporters filled the seats. Cameras waited outside, and the family of Stacey Dramiga sat quietly in the first row. Her sister clutched a small photo of Stacey smiling in her hiking gear, the one taken just a week before her death. At the defense table sat Samuel Akeem Sharon, the man accused of taking her life. He looked smaller than he had in his mugshot, nervous, eyes darting between his attorney and the floor. Across from him, prosecutors organized their files. The case that had shaken San Antonio for more than a year was finally about to unfold.
But then came the twist no one expected. Before opening statements, the defense team filed a motion to introduce new DNA evidence, the same evidence that had arrived on Detective Alvarez's desk only days earlier. It showed another partial DNA trace found on Stacey's torn clothing, a trace that didn't match either Sharon or Stacey. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters scribbled in their notebooks. Was this the start of reasonable doubt? Prosecutor Linda Vasquez, a sharp and confident attorney with 2 decades of experience, stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "the DNA in question is so minimal that it could have come from an innocent source, a paramedic, a park visitor, or even from environmental transfer. It doesn't change the overwhelming evidence linking this defendant to the murder of Stacey Dramiga." The judge nodded but allowed the defense to proceed. Sharon's attorney, Michael Trent, rose and turned toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this case is not as simple as the prosecution wants you to believe. DNA alone doesn't prove guilt. It proves only that something was there, not how, when, or why. And now we have DNA from another individual. Ask yourselves, what else hasn't been discovered?"
The room grew tense. Detective Alvarez watched from the back row, his stomach tightening. He knew the DNA evidence against Sharon was strong. The rock, the fingernail samples, the phone data. But the new trace complicated things. Could it really point to someone else? The first week of the trial was intense. Jurors listened to witness after witness. Park rangers, forensic scientists, and neighbors who described Stacey as gentle and full of life. The forensic expert testified that Sharon's DNA was found in multiple spots on Stacey's body and on the weapon. The match probability, she said, is 1 in 1 trillion. Statistically, it's him. Then came the defense cross-examination. "Is it possible," Trent asked, "for DNA to transfer through indirect contact?" The expert hesitated. "In very rare circumstances, yes. But it's unlikely in this case." "Unlikely," Trent repeated, turning to the jury, "but possible." Sharon sat motionless, his face unreadable. As the trial continued, the prosecution painted a chilling picture of what happened that morning. Using cell phone tower data, they showed that Sharon's phone was at the trail from 9:46 to 11:19 a.m. They played surveillance clips of his car driving into a nearby gas station minutes after the attack, his clothes dark and his hands appearing to wipe something off the steering wheel. When asked why he went to that area, Sharon said softly, "I just like walking there. I didn't see her." But the most powerful testimony came from the forensic technician who had processed the rock, the murder weapon. "We found the victim's blood and the defendant's DNA both on this object." She held up photos. "That tells us physical contact occurred during the assault." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense lawyer didn't move. Still, that single phrase, "another DNA trace," lingered in everyone's mind. It was like a splinter in the case, something small but sharp enough to draw blood. During a break, Detective Alvarez stepped outside for air. A local reporter approached him. "Detective, do you believe there's another suspect?" He looked at her for a moment. "He believes," he said carefully, "that the evidence will speak louder than anyone's opinion." But privately, he couldn't shake a memory, a note from one of the early Park interviews. A witness had once mentioned hearing 2 voices arguing near the woods before the attack, not one. The detail had been buried in reports, dismissed at the time as confusion. Now it suddenly seemed important. That night, Alvarez went back to the evidence room. He reread the old field notes, the maps, the timeline. There it was again. 2 male voices, loud, then silence. Could Sharon have been with someone else? He contacted the forensic lab first thing in the morning. "Run that new DNA through CODIS, see if we get a hit." The lab tech warned him it could take weeks. She said, "It's a partial sample. The system might not find anything." Meanwhile, in court, the defense ramped up its efforts to plant doubt. They showed photos of how close the trail was to nearby housing and claimed dozens of people could have touched objects near the scene. They brought in an expert witness who testified that DNA could be transferred from skin cells in the air, an idea prosecutors quickly challenged as scientifically exaggerated. As testimony dragged on, Stacey's family sat through every word. Her sister cried quietly when photos from the trail were shown. The prosecutor, noticing, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder as she passed the evidence table. On the 9th day of trial, the prosecution rested. It was time for the defense to present their case.
Michael Trent stood confidently. "We intend to prove that the investigation rushed to judgment," he said. "Police focused on one suspect from the moment they got a DNA match, ignoring other possibilities." Then he called his surprise witness, a woman named Maria Lopez, a resident who lived near the trail. She told the court she saw a different man, not Sharon, walking into the woods around the same time Stacey arrived. He was older, maybe late 30s. He had a beard. I didn't think much of it at first. Her statement wasn't part of the original police file. Alvarez frowned. Had they missed that? The defense ended its questioning, leaving jurors with uncertainty. The image of another man now hovered in everyone's mind. That night, Alvarez received a call from the lab. "We ran that partial DNA," the voice said. "No hits in the national database, but it's male and it's not Sharon." Alvarez's heart sank. It wasn't proof of innocence, but it was enough to cause reasonable doubt. The next morning, in court, both sides gave closing arguments. The prosecution showed the photos again. The rock, the DNA chart, the cell phone map. "You don't get evidence this strong by accident," Vasquez said passionately. "This man killed Stacey Dramiga. Don't let him walk free." The defense countered, calm but firm. "Science doesn't lie, but scientists can be wrong. And when there's doubt, even a shadow of doubt, you must choose truth over pressure." The jury deliberated for hours. Reporters waited outside in the Texas heat. When the foreman finally returned, everyone held their breath. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." But before he could read it, a court officer stepped forward and handed the judge a note. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up. "We have a development," she said. "The court has just received new forensic information related to this case." Gasps filled the room. Alvarez felt his pulse race. The judge continued, "Both parties will reconvene tomorrow morning. This evidence could affect the verdict process." Reporters scrambled for the doors, cameras flashing. Stacey's sister covered her face, trembling. Detective Alvarez whispered under his breath, "Please let it be the truth, whatever it is." The phone rang in the middle of the night. Detective Marcus Alvarez grabbed it on the first ring, half asleep. "Detective," said the voice on the line, "we have a confirmed match. The partial DNA from the Dramiga case. It belongs to a man named Christopher Hale, arrested yesterday in Travis County for attacking a woman on a hiking trail." Alvarez sat up straight. "You're sure?" "Positive," the analyst replied. "It's a direct match." For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Then the detective whispered, "So there was someone else." By sunrise, Alvarez was already driving to Austin. The freeway lights blurred past as he replayed the last year in his head. The rock, the evidence, the endless nights. All along they'd believed one man, Samuel Sharon, was responsible. Now another name had entered the story, one that changed everything. When he arrived at the Travis County Jail, Alvarez was met by local deputies. "We picked him up last night," one of them said. "He was found hiding behind a dumpster near Barton Creek. The victim got away and called for help." Hale was 38, tall, muscular, with a rough beard and cold, watchful eyes. On his right hand was a scar that looked recent, a cut that matched the kind of wound someone might get from swinging a jagged rock. Inside the interview room, Alvarez faced him across the table. "You know why I'm here," Alvarez said. He shrugged. "You're the San Antonio detective, right? That woman from last year?" Alvarez nodded slowly. "Stacey Dramiga. Your DNA was found on her clothing." Hale smirked.
That's crazy. I don't even know that name. But his eyes gave something away, a flicker, a small twitch of surprise when Alvarez said clothing. The detective leaned forward. You were on that trail, weren't you? Silence. He tried another approach. Samuel Sharon is sitting in a courtroom right now being tried for a murder you may have helped commit. Hale's smirk vanished. His jaw tightened. I didn't help nobody, he snapped. He stopped mid-sentence. Alvarez watched him closely. You just what, Christopher? Hale looked away, muttering under his breath. He said she was alone. The detective froze. He said she was alone. That was it. The missing piece. Back in San Antonio, the courthouse was already in chaos. News of the new suspect had reached the judge before the verdict could be announced. Both the prosecution and defense demanded an emergency hearing. Reporters outside the courthouse screamed questions. Is there a second killer? Was the wrong man charged? Inside, Sharon sat at the defense table, pale and silent. His attorney leaned over, whispering rapidly, while the prosecutor shuffled papers. The judge entered and called the court to order. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, new forensic evidence has emerged linking another suspect to this case. I am suspending the jury's decision pending further investigation. Gasps filled the courtroom. Months later, in a packed courtroom, the verdicts came. Sharon was convicted of first-degree murder and aggravated sexual assault, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Hale, charged as an accomplice, received 40 years for his role and for failing to stop the attack. When the sentence was read, Stacey's sister finally spoke to the press. Her voice trembled but stayed steady. Justice doesn't bring her back, she said, but at least she can rest now. She loved that trail. She deserved peace, not pain. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, the same trees where Stacey had once walked, smiling, with the world still bright around her. The city placed new security cameras along the trail, added more lights, and renamed the small section the Stacey Dramiga Memorial Pathway.
Every spring, people still gather there, runners, families, dog walkers, to lay flowers and remember her. Detective Alvarez visits too. He stands quietly by the sign, thinking of how close they came to missing the truth. DNA doesn't lie, he once said, but it doesn't tell the whole story either. People do. As the wind moves through the trees, the trail feels calm again. But for those who know what happened, the peace carries weight. A reminder that evil can hide in ordinary places, and that justice sometimes walks a long, winding road before it finally arrives. The murder of Stacey Dramiga shocked Texas and the nation, a case that began with a walk in the sunshine and ended in tragedy. Thanks to modern DNA technology and relentless investigators, two men who thought they'd escaped justice were finally brought down. Stacey's story reminds us that even in the darkest places, truth finds its way. This is the Texas hiking trail horror, the crime that proved no secret stays buried forever. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to keep you updated on real event true crime stories, and we are watching your comment.